I was already working in the area of preventive mental health. I did my master's in child and adolescent mental health, and I was working with oral storytelling and trying to get teachers to tell stories more, so that traditional stories, fairy tales, have a lot of rich metaphors that children can work with that are just good for children, and it's fun for teachers, so I'm trying to get teachers to be more creative. And then I came across the work of Martin Seligman and the character strengths in particular. And of all the things from positive psychology that I introduced to teachers and children, it was really the strengths and the 24 character strengths that resonated the most, both with the teachers and with the children. And my goal was really to give teachers a vocabulary of strengths, because good teachers are always strengths-based, and they have always been strengths-based. And I trained as a special needs teacher, and when I read about the character strengths, I thought, this is instinctively how I've always taught, but these 24 strengths give me a vocabulary, a language that will broaden and deepen my work. So I introduced the strengths to the teachers, and we wove them into a cycle of festivals. So I linked things like creativity and love of learning to a beginnings festival, and we linked hope and spirituality to an Advent festival which we celebrate before Christmas. And also I took traditional stories like Hansel and Gretel and lesser known myths, and we looked for strengths in those traditional stories, and that's really the program that I developed. And the teachers would make the strengths and put them on the walls. So if they were focusing on hope and spirituality, those words would be up on the walls, because I knew that if the teachers saw them up there, they'd look for them more in the children. And that is what's happened. And what has been really encouraging is that the children have picked up the language from the teachers. So now you hear children saying, "That was brave. I need to be hopeful here, don't I?" And you were really kind there. So then we get not only the teachers using the language, but the children use it to each other. And that has a really positive impact on teamwork and citizenship and behaviour as well. So it's actually quite, I'm very excited by it, because I think the children love it. But in fact what we did was to get children to strength spot with a friend. So we gave them the 24 character strengths, and we said, with your friend, work out which your top 5 are. And then we had the same group of children do the VIA strengths test, and actually they were pretty spot on. They were more or less the same, but all the children really do love knowing what their top strengths are. The school was actually being inspected. We have an inspection system called Ofsted in the UK, and the Ofsted inspector was very, very impressed with this school, but he thought, I'll just go around last thing on Friday lunchtime. If I'm going to see any problems in this school, it's going to be a Friday lunchtime in the playground. So he went for a walk, and lo and behold, he saw one lad hit another lad, and the lad who'd just been clunked was Daniel. So the Ofsted inspector was really interested, what would happen now? You know, would a big fight kick off? And Daniel looked around and he saw an adult. He saw the Ofsted inspector, and he stopped. And he ran up to the Ofsted inspector and said, and the Ofsted inspector said to him, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do? And he says, I know what I've got to do. I've got to stop, and I've got to think, and I've got to pull on my reins of self-control. And we were absolutely thrilled, because that little 6-year-old has been given a language to think about himself, and he knows he's got self-control. And I was in another school not so long ago, and a little boy called Callum he'd been having problems getting on with other children, and he'd not been sharing very well, and he'd not been very happy. And the head teacher had sat down with him and talked to Callum about the fact that if he showed kindness, then actually possibly some of the other children might actually play with him a bit more, because he was actually provoking other children at this point. And when I went into the school, Callum opened the door for me, and he offered to carry my bag. And I said, "That's very, very kind of you, Callum." And he said, "Yeah, kindness is one of my top strengths." And it's just making such a difference to these children's self-image. These are children whose, you know, some of them come from very difficult backgrounds, and they had quite low self-esteem. And if you'd asked them a year or 2 years ago, what are your strengths? They'd said, I haven't got any. And they know they've got strengths now. So I'm really very passionate about using strengths for children. Well, I've just started working with a high school called Titherington in Macclesfield in Cheshire, and I've done some work on positive psychology and strengths with their year 12, that's the sort of 16, 17-year-olds, and we did a workshop on strengths and spotting strengths. And I'm going to be doing some work on what we call personal statements. When the kids apply to university, they have to write a personal statement, a statement about themselves. It's part of the application process. And I'm going to be looking with them at what does a strengths-based personal statement look like. Why are you applying for this subject? What strengths are you using in that subject? So that's a piece of work that's coming up. But I'm also going to be using strengths. What I'm trying to do is to embed strengths into the curriculum and the life of the school. So I'm just running a series of pilot experimental lessons where we take particular strengths and focus on them with the students on how they use those strengths in the lesson, but also where they can find those strengths in the subject matter of the lesson. So I'm taking history as a subject, and I'm going to team teach it with the history teacher. And we've taken teamwork and creativity and curiosity as 3 strengths. And we're looking at the Romans. So we're going to have the central story, we're using a storytelling approach of the Roman invasion of Britain, and then we're going to be both using teamwork in the lesson and looking at where the Romans and the ancient Britons used teamwork. So my idea is, and I don't know whether it will work yet because this is a pilot, is that if the children can identify their own strengths of teamwork and then realise that the Romans had those strengths as well, it gives them an added connection to the curriculum so that it's more meaningful for them.